Welcome to the weekend primetime. There are less than 100 days to go before Americans head to the polls and cast their votes in the midterm elections. And yet the legal and political ground beneath us is shifting in real time. The past week and a half shattered the House map, and with it, Democrats' once clear path to retaking the lower chamber. Republicans are emerging with a sizable structural advantage, as two blockbuster court rulings allow them to carve out roughly 10 more favorable House seats. First, it was the Supreme Court hollowing out the Voting Rights Act, triggering outrage in Louisiana and across the South, opening the door for Republicans there to erase at least one majority black congressional district, a state that is roughly a third black, a state that has only ever sent a handful of black leaders to Washington, D.C. and had no black representation in Congress from 1877 to 1991. That's 114 years. And then this week, Virginia's top court struck down a voter-approved redistricting plan. That plan would have given Democrats 4 more seats in Congress. The New York Times reports the Republicans were quick to celebrate the Virginia decision, with one of Speaker Mike Johnson's senior political aides interrupting a meeting in Texas to break the news. And Johnson later himself celebrating on the phone with Virginia's Republican former governor Glenn Youngkin. For now, Democrats are still favored to win the House. But all of this raises unsettling questions about what the redistricting wars have wrought for the midterms and for our democracy long term. 2 legal decisions, immeasurable consequences for who holds the power. Joining us now to unpack all of this, Basil Smikle, MS Now political analyst and professor of practice at the Columbia University School of Professional Studies, and James Sample, professor of law at Hofstra University and author of the Substack, Who Decides, Who Decides. James, Basil, it's great to have both of you guys with us tonight. So, James, you and I had a conversation the other day about all of this as I was processing these rulings in real time. You do a very good job of bringing us back down to earth. You called the Virginia decision a, quote, defensive or defensible ruling, an indefensible landscape. Break that down for me.
What I mean by that, Antonia, is that the ruling in Virginia is defensible. And from the very beginning, as far back as October, as far back as a couple of weeks ago, when the district court in Virginia came up with 7 grounds on which the district court found the process problematic, I said that this one ground, the ground on which it was ultimately held to be unconstitutional under the state constitution of Virginia, was at the very least a credible, serious, non-frivolous argument. And let's be clear, Virginia put in place state constitutional provisions that were intended to safeguard and to be structural protections that make it difficult to amend their constitution as a matter of state constitutional law. They didn't put that in place for this. It's been in place for decades. And the basic synopsis of why this was held to be unconstitutional under Virginia law is that in order to amend the Virginia state constitution, you need to pass an amendment through the House of Delegates, through the Assembly. There needs to be a general election for the House of Delegates, and then it needs to pass again. So you have 2 different legislatures pass the same amendment. What happened here is that voters started voting for the legislature in September of 2025. 40% of the voters who cast a vote in the general House of Delegates election voted prior to the amendment being passed in the House of Delegates in late October. To be clear, the decision of the Virginia Supreme Court, I think, is a disaster for our democracy. It's probably right on the law, and it's actually a pro-voter protection decision. The problem is the context against which it occurs. And the context against which it occurs is one in which we are racing to the bottom, one in which we are becoming the inverse of what we should be. The House is actually becoming the Senate. 100 years ago, the Senate was chosen by the state legislatures. Yeah. We are now in a place where the state legislature is effectively choosing who gets to be in the House of Representatives in Congress.
So, Basil, can you walk us through what the overall consequences are for democracy? Because it feels like we are racing toward a landscape, a context in which even if Democrats win big, this year. They probably win small. And we may be leading in or walking into a world in which basically we are enshrining potential minority rule going forward, where one side can win 55% of the vote and still lose.
I see it as a lot more stark than that, actually. I start by saying that what we're seeing is the intentionality by Republicans to make sure Obama did not have coattails. Democrats lost 1,000 state legislative seats while Obama was president. That's not an accident, because what they're doing is pushing all of these policies to the states. There are, 23 states with a Republican trifecta, 26 that have Republican governors. So when we think about what's next for Democrats on this issue of voting rights and redistricting, I should say, I get nervous because there isn't a lot of room left, right, to be able to fix this, number one. Number two, I said this when Texas entered the fray to try to do their redistricting. And I said, this is going to be tantamount to an American version of apartheid, because it's not just about congressional seats. What the congressional seat allows states to do is then redistrict state legislative seats, city council seats, all the way down to even school board elections, right? So when you think about the removal of the civic opportunity, civic engagement for Black people, the fact that the president reclassified certain jobs where there are concentrations of women, particularly women of color, as professionals, making it difficult to get student loans, restricting now with the Supreme Court's help who can go to college and what colleges they can go to, and then how many hundreds of thousands of African American women lost their jobs. So there's also an economic attack on African Americans here. So when you put those two things together, to me it says you're trying to centralize through our entire federal bureaucracy and have it trickle down to the states the restriction of Black civic engagement and economic empowerment. That to me rings very true to, an American version of apartheid that is not easily unshakable in the near term.
So the question is, do the Democrats have any legal recourse here with all of this redistricting that's taking place to try to level the playing field, or is it just going to come down simply at the ballot box that they're going to have their best and final chance at regaining power?
I don't think they have much legal recourse. They certainly don't have legal recourse in Virginia. This is an independent and adequate state ground, which means that the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't really have jurisdiction to overturn what happened. There are some areas. Florida is facing a challenge to its redistricting effort, which is effectively in place but subject to a challenge that is still ongoing. But those are long shots in terms of legal challenges. Basically what has happened, and I am less optimistic than many people. I don't know. I think that we could end up with 60% of the vote producing 40% of the seats. This is very, very stark. Antonio says I bring it down, but realistically.
And I agree, but I agree with you.
Basil and I were talking earlier. It is not just grim. It is really, really grim. And the only way that I see forward is to fight the gerrymandering with gerrymandering, which we both hate. It's bad for democracy, but it might be necessary for democracy in the short run. And then perhaps 2030, which feels like cold comfort, maybe 2040, you can get a federal ban on partisan redistricting. Because let's be clear, a big part of the reason that we are in this apartheid, the resegregation, is the U.S. Supreme Court. 1980s John Roberts in the Reagan administration dreamed of where 2026 John Roberts has gotten America.
And let me just say this, because you did talk about democracy and you asked that question. It's important to remember that they put all of this in paper. They put all of this in writing. And there were a lot of people that said, it can't really happen. He's not going to go that far. Of course he will. Because it's not just him. It's everything and everyone around him that wants to make America great again. And we kept saying, this can happen. It's not that difficult. But folks felt, and I always say this, people got complacent. But now we're in a situation where things do look very, very grim. If you're a Democrat and you actually, or anybody that actually cares about this stuff, and that's the concern. And I tell people this all the time: the midterms will not save us. So as much as we would talk about the importance of, you know what, it's actually having a version of Project 2025 that outlines what needs to happen going forward. What do we need to put in place? What guardrails need to go back up?
But isn't part of the problem that this hasn't been war gamed far enough out? And for worst case scenario, with the Republicans coming in with this super aggressive posture, is the position now that Democrats need to take that they are looking at every single majority they have where they can get anything possibly by and looking at the law and then pursuing it as aggressively as possible, much like when they talk about packing the court, that scares Republicans to death.
Yeah.
And you still have kind of the tempered language and, oh, look at what happened in Virginia when, like you said, like I think that James's point, he's addressing reality. The law was against them. And it was a valiant effort in the sense that they mobilized their supporters. They got to show the energy and they get to see what's there and who's there to fight. But it just wasn't going to go to the finish line.
Every type of political, social, and socio-political mobilization in this country has been built off of abolitionist movement and the civil rights movement. No question about it. So what we're seeing now, and I guess the potential path forward, is to have a multifaceted plan. There's a legal strategy, right? There's the mobilization. You see that with the No Kings rallies. You've seen that with all of the Democratic overperformance in some of these races up until now. And so, yeah, you got to keep that going. But you got to keep it going. There really is, I don't want to say time is running out, but it kind of is.
Or is it going to take an Obama-like figure to actually drive turnout in a way that simply is not happening right now? And where you have the kind of incredible turnout from low-intensity voters, low-information voters, and they finally...
I think it takes more than an Obama-like figure. Like, if we are, as many historians believe, and I guess I would like for the two of you to weigh on this, if we are in a post-Reconstruction reactionary period, I mean, it took us decades, and there were many people who literally put their lives on the line to get us out of that period and to bring us to the America that like we were born into and thought we were going to enjoy to survive that. And I don't know. That is a daunting thing to face. As someone who grew up hearing the stories of what it was like for my grandparents to live through that, it's genuinely shocking to sit with it. That is what I'm going to have to live through now.